So first things first, Steve.
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm well. Yeah. Great.
It's very good to hear.
Yeah.
And you have a new album out, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Before we get into the new album, I'd like to start where you kind of ended with the last one.
Sure.
Because I suppose you release an album, you do a kind of a tour, you go into that cycle, and that ends. Where is your mind once kind of that album had its time?
Like after the album's done, and then what the next step is?
Yeah, in terms of, because and then you go tour, and that album cycle is in a way done, and then kind of you think, oh, maybe I should.
Now it's time for the next thing. Yeah, I think I just had a crazy time. I had a crazy with my last album. I was on the road a lot, you know, and I was burnt out. I needed a break. And yeah, I covered a lot of ground. My father passed away. It was just a crazy sort of like year, you know. Good, but there was just a lot going on, and it was good for me to kind of just reset a bit. And I was like interested in writing new songs. I kind of felt like I was ready. I had some things I'd been thinking about, some things I wanted to say. I also played a lot of solo shows after kind of the touring cycle for the band and the record. And that was great. I ended up doing a tour with Lee Ronaldo and Meg Baird, and kind of resetting and like getting back into playing solo, and I really enjoyed that. I did that for like a half a year, basically. I also I have this duo project, which is just guitar and drums, and we recorded an album. And yeah, I worked on a film soundtrack. I was just kind of like dabbling in different things, but also writing new songs as well, making demos and editing lyrics, all this stuff, you know, trying to conceive the next record, you know.
You say you were dabbling in all kinds of different things. Were you looking for a certain thing? Were you looking for a certain source of inspiration? Not
really. I mean, I think that I was getting back to some of the things that I had missed. You know, like I really like improvising. I really like this duo project that I do with this drummer John Trzynski, and it's really free. It's like it feels really open, and I wanted to kind of open myself up a little more in that way, because it's kind of getting back to like what I used to play like and what I used to do, and it's pretty rewarding.
Did it remind you of those years ago?
It did, yeah. It's funny because it puts it all kind of in perspective. I mean, that project has also changed. It's interesting because we keep pushing it, you know, and it got like really loud and really loose, and it was like just fun, you know. It's fun to kind of, I don't know, kind of clear my mind and just do that, you know. It was really fun.
Because I can imagine, especially with the Eyes on the Lines, that album did quite well. And then, do you think that's when you have a bunch of albums that all do quite well, that you're boxed in more than before?
Yeah, I think maybe. I mean, it depends. For me, I don't feel that way, but it is boxed in a certain way where you have, for instance, like you have essentially like a year's worth of touring that's like planned out. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna be playing these songs for the next while. But I don't mind it, you know. But at the same time, it was nice to have a break and to be able to kind of reset and just explore playing again, you know.
You mentioned the solo shows, and what did you notice about your guitar playing? In a sense, doing those shows again, being by yourself, and did it kind of influence how you approached this new record?
It did, yeah. It's interesting because I feel like the last album, Eyes on the Lines, was so guitar heavy, and there's like a web of like hot licks going on. You know, there's so much guitar on that record. Most of it is James Elkington. A lot of it is, and he's such a good guitar player. And we were really like getting into this more kind of rocky, kind of almost like Television, the band Television, you know, really influenced by that album Marquee Moon, and how like there's like this interlocking two guitar thing. And to kind of cycle through all that and then to just play solo, playing older songs, cover songs, it just made me, it kind of just reduced all that stuff and kind of getting to the core of how I write songs, and also how to sing. You know, singing is something like the more I do it, the kind of better I feel like I get. And I felt like I built up all the solo shows that I had been doing was helpful for me to kind of think about this next record and how I wanted it to kind of be vocally forward, and also just thinking about songwriting in a more simple way. And for me, I think simplicity, especially in songwriting, was something I kind of struggled with, because I was such this kind of guitar player and trying to figure out how to sing over stuff, and I almost came at it from like a reverse way, where I was never a guy being like, okay, like this is a 1-4-5 chord song, and it, like, you know, and here's the bridge and all this stuff. It all kind of happened differently, you know. So it was interesting to kind of think about songwriting just more in a more simple sort of structure.
Well, that's an interesting thought, because well, yesterday you played a solo show here in Amsterdam, playing the new songs, I assume.
Yeah.
And I listened to the album, and it is quite. You do create quite soundscapes in a way that there's all kinds of things going on. So was it important for you that the songs were just as good being played just by one person?
Yeah. I think it says something, I suppose, for the song, you know, and it's also, it's interesting to present them solo, because I feel like it's another aspect to it. And, you know, sometimes when you see someone try to do that, like play band songs solo, you know, it's always like, I wonder if he can, if like they can pull it off, or I wonder what it's going to sound like. And for me, the response was cool. Like, people are like, wow, I can hear different things, you know, when it's like just reduced to me and the acoustic. That's something that I really enjoy, you know. I also obviously like playing with a band, but solo is fun too.
Sure. And quickly about the vocals then, because you, when you're by yourself, it's in a sense less music to hide behind. So what is that like to kind of just be there and then just have your vocals be quite prominent?
It's cool because it's, you can't hide behind anything, and it's challenging. Another aspect that I like is I can kind of, sometimes if I'm playing with a band, I have like a real kind of loose style, so sometimes the band would be like, hey man, you added another, did you see that other measure you put on, you know, the chorus, or I'm like, you know, I don't have like this like set structure in my head, so sometimes like the band's like, hey man, like you gotta get those parts down, but I mean, I know how the song moves, but sometimes, you know, it gets a little like weird.
Well, like you mentioned, the improvising, is that part of it? Kind of improvising in the moment?
Yeah, and I think playing solo, I can do that, and I can kind of move around a bit. I have a lot, obviously, like, there's not someone like trying to follow me, and I can kind of go in different places, you know.
Right.
So that's fun, you know. I enjoy that.
You mentioned kind of going through that cycle, having a tough year, a good year, but quite a tough year. Can I assume you didn't do any writing as you were touring and going through? I mean, you mentioned your father passed away. Did you write then already, or did that come after taking a break for a while?
I think it came after. I mean, I had like certain ideas, but it really came after I had a break and I was like home, and I basically was, I have like a rehearsal space, and I was going there every day and just kind of trying to come up with stuff.
What was one of the first songs that rose to the top or floated to the top?
I think it was basically the first song, New Moon. I think that was the first song that I kind of came up with.
Do you remember the setting, so to say, the kind of the mood you were in as you were writing that song?
Yeah, it was sort of, I remember feeling really lost and like confused. It was like right after Trump had been elected, and there was just sort of this weird kind of alien cloud over the world, and I think people started kind of harboring like this anxiety and sort of like it almost it sort of felt like a weird bad dream or something. And I was like thinking, I kind of came up with that song like in that moment.
Right. And when you talk about when isn't necessarily about the song, isn't necessarily about that, but when something like that is kind of the environment when you're writing it, how does that seep through in the music?
I think, for me, when I was thinking about when I was sitting around and feeling that way, and like I think there's a certain when something like that's going on, I think that there's a certain level of like isolation that people feel when like there's a weird sort of there's strangeness in the air, and how people kind of hold that and keep that weight and like sort of inside and in their mind, and you're like sitting there in your room just like being like, I can't, what do I do? It's almost like this helpless sort of feeling. And I don't know, was sort of feeling that way, but also feeling hopeful and knowing that there's a lot of other people who are feeling the same way, and how there's not, with like experiencing those kinds of things, it's so isolating, but it's just a part of it, and everyone's sort of dealing with it,
Sure.
So I think, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
well, let me
go ahead.
Ask this then. In terms of those kind of, not this one in particular, but those kind of events, and is music then your way of trying to understand it, or trying to find some of a structure in what's going on?
I don't know if I'm trying to, but I'm just sort of reflecting on it.
Okay.
And also for me, I think that the way that the songs are kind of written and the way that I kind of like to present them is, they're kind of, I don't want to sound like I'm like too boastful or whatever, but that I'd like to be a little bit abstract and have people kind of, use imagery and have people interpret them the way that they want to,
sorry.
Okay.
No, because I read this that you prefer kind of a more poetic style, a more narrative style, where people, like you say, have different possible interpretations.
Right.
So when you write like that, is it almost like a stream of consciousness thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
It is. And I think that's kind of what I learned, just learning about like poets and how they work, and like people like John Ashbery, like someone who I really admire, and the way that they can kind of have this vernacular kind of bank in their mind and sort of create these images with words, and also trust their instincts, and be able to like improvise and say things and not feel like, just kind of go with this like almost like this kind of flow through a story, and I think it's interesting, to read someone like John Ashbery, and another poet I really admire is Eileen Myles, and the way that they just walk you through certain things. And also, they take risks with language, and sometimes you're like, what does that mean? And maybe that's not, that's up to you, you know. That's not, they're not trying to convey this super esoteric thing. Oh, you don't know what that means? Like, well, you're dumb or whatever. You know, it's sort of like it's an offering of like, you know, language. And to me, I really like that in songs and music. And I know it's common, but I like to kind of use, like, just sort of write whatever I'm thinking, and maybe just keep it. Even, you know, someone I really admire, like, reading, like, David Bowie and Lou Reed, particularly. Like, I'm more of a Lou Reed guy, but you know, that's for another discussion.
We can go on for hours about him.
The way that, just reading about how, like, Bowie he wouldn't even have lyrics. He would just be like, okay, and he would be like singing as they're tracking, and just like coming up with words like off the top of his head, and just like fitting them in. And, you know, and Lou was a bit different, but similarly, I think he was, you know, influenced. Like, the poet Delmore Schwartz, you know, was his sort of mentor, and he was really interested in playing with language in that way. And he had a different sensibility, because he's a real smart ass, you know.
But I do think, like you say about Lou Reed, it's almost in this, and I suppose with David Bowie as well, but it's in their delivery as well, the way they kind of pronounce certain words and then put emphasis on bits. And
obviously Dylan as well, you know.
Right.
All about the delivery, you know.